and welcome to Drilling Insight. I'm Jeremy Verduzco, host and editor of The Driller magazine, and I'm joined today by drilling trainer, the driller writer, and co-host, Brock Yordy. Welcome, Brock.
Hey, Jeremy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. And on today's show, we welcome Colin Barden. Thanks for being on the show, Colin.
Thanks for inviting me, Jeremy.
So Colin is Director of Intertech Management based near Sydney, Australia, and he conducts training on all things drilling down there. And he recently wrapped up training sessions on screens and gravel packs, as well as mud testing and techniques. So we brought him on to talk about his long career in drilling and in the drilling industry, and hear about the industry from an Australian perspective. So let's jump into our usual opening question. Did you choose the industry or did it choose you, Colin?
I think the short answer, Jeremy, was a bit of both, because I was doing an apprenticeship as a fitter and machinist and transferred into the industry, and liked it so much that stayed there ever since.
Tell us about your current role. What are you doing right now?
My current role is a combination of many things because I'm semi-retired. I run training courses, face-to-face training courses for the Australian Drilling Industry Association. Wow, I play tennis 3 days a week, try and keep myself fit. And I keep abreast of what's going on in the industry all the time through the training and so forth. And I do editing work on various different training manuals that we've got. And because of my background as CEO of the Australian Drilling Industry Training Committee, where I was there for 10 years, I still do a fair bit of work with editing and new courses and new manuals and new procedures and all that sort of carry on.
So that doesn't really sound like semi-retired. You obviously, training is your passion. You enjoy being part of the industry and continuing to promote?
My passion is really drilling holes in the ground and training people accordingly. Irrespective, like we're involved pretty well down here in mineral exploration because today we're the #2 gold producer in the world. China is #1. In America and Fort Knox, you hold more gold than anybody else in the world, as in storage. But production-wise, we are the #2 producer, and we're also the #1 producer of uranium. So there's a lot of exploration work going on, and it's picked up tremendously in the last 12 months. I would think that at least 60 to 70% of our drill rigs would be working on mineral exploration work of all types of minerals. And that allows the training to come in because Australia is a country that's probably landmass about the same size, maybe a little bit less, but not much, as the continental United States, with only 25 million people. If you compare the difference in population to what you have, the vast traveling distances that we've got, most people live on the east coast of Australia because basically most of the minerals is always where you don't want to go. And if drilling for minerals here, say in Sydney, was applicable and you could do it from an environmental perspective, everybody would want to do it. That's the thing, probably one of your questions are going to be about people entering the industry. We've got that many people these days who want to go to university to start with. And the moment they go to university, then naturally enough, they don't want to go out in the middle of the nowhere to drill holes in the ground. So it's one of those things that's always hard to get people. Once you get people actually involved in the industry, it's not hard to keep them involved unless there is a downturn. I've never seen too many people leave this industry with the exception of a downturn in it. Now we have the mineral exploration. We've also got water wells, of which they're quite diversified, and geotechnical and environmental work. The geotech and environmental work, naturally enough, is in the cities, more so than anywhere else. And the water wells are a combination of both because you're either in city or outside in residential blocks or on the larger farms or ranches, you'd like to call them. But other than that, yeah, I keep myself fairly well involved, which I like to do, because it's one of these things that I quite believe in the fact that if you stop being involved in the industry that you've actually worked in all your life, and go off and run and do something altogether stupid differently, it doesn't take long before you get sick of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I still love the industry.
So tell us a little bit about your approach to training. Is it field-based, more classroom-based? What kind of technologies are involved? I mean, all of these may have changed over the last 12 months with COVID, but what does it look like before that? What does it look like now? What do you hope it may look like again?
I'm glad you mentioned COVID, Jeremy, because it has changed things dramatically, particularly crossing straight borders. There are some states that have had lockdowns that we can't cross and do face-to-face courses. But I believe that it's a combination of two things. One, we're training through trying to get the training courses as practical as possible. And the reason for that is we always start out a face-to-face course where we've got people that might only be in the industry for 3 months. And then you've got other people that might be in the industry for 20 years as supervisors. And you've got to marry that together to keep everybody interested. And I'm not saying it's hard. Once you know how to do it, it's reasonably easy. But to get everybody participating and involved and wanting to participate and involved over a period of 2 days, you've always got to bring in the practical applications. You can't do it by theory. And I never, ever, ever read it from the book. It's just straight off the top of your head, and there you've got the book to go through in your leisure or for their exams. I really believe that being involved myself in the practical application of drilling and manufacturing in the drilling industry, that you need both. And you absolutely need both. For example, Rock, you'll probably be able to understand that when you're running a drill rig, and if the driller doesn't know what those gauges are telling him, or how much his mud pump is putting out, for example, or his air compressor is putting out, and what sort of returns he's getting back to the surface, that's where you need the theory to be able to work that out, to do the formulas, and then put it into practical applications. And I think that's what keeps everybody interested. They all want to go practical. Every driller wants to throw their pens away when they leave school. So we've got to get them back involved in that to the extent that that makes it easy. And some of these apps that are around today, you can get on your phone that shows, and I know the association here has got a brilliant app which shows a lot of things as far as calculations are concerned, and they're rule of thumb type calculations rather than long ones. And we have a tendency here as well to mix up both the metric and the imperial system. We ask people in a training course, what diameter hole are you drilling? And they might say 6 5/8. You say, what depth? They might say 150, 200 meters. Well, here we go, we've mixed up the two. So our formulas we use, our rule of thumb formulas in a training course, are always to accommodate those situations. And we use litres per minute or litres per second rather than gallons as well. It's actually litres are much easier to use. But I won't convince you of that.
So you trained and worked all over the world, including right here in our United States. What are some of the differences that, like, if a U.S. driller came to Australia, what would they notice immediately? What do you guys do different that U.S. drillers might not be doing, or we would think you're a little batty for?
That's a difficult one, because when I first went to the States and I was employed as a special representative with the company Gardner Denver in Dallas, Texas, people were asking the question, what are you doing here in Texas teaching us how to drill holes in the ground floor? Or from the manufacturing point of view. And the same thing applies a little bit over here. However, we work with each other and learn a tremendous amount. A good example of reverse circulation drilling, as in air core and stuff like that, which is RC. It was invented here, and now it's been transferred across to America, and it's been quite successful for mineral drilling. There's a lot of things that cross-pollinate from what has been learned from over years and years and years of experience, and then new ideas, and those new ideas get sent across between ourselves, our two different countries, quite often, to the extent that we're keeping abreast in, I would think, the two experienced countries in the world of drilling, America and Australia, without a doubt. And we're sharing that knowledge constantly with each other all the time. And I think also, particularly with our various different associations and the organization that you work for, is that cross-pollination of ideas all the time is extremely good, because everybody comes out of it with a good learning curve. The difference is probably more to do with distance of traveling here, accent, slowing down the speech. We have a tendency to clip our words a lot, and sometimes a little hard to understand, and particularly when we use slang language. But I like to work in America, very much so. If I had a choice to go somewhere else other than live in Australia, I would most certainly go and live in America tomorrow, not a problem. And not only that, but be well received. And I think that's one of the most important things, is the hospitality that we as Australians have received in America has been phenomenal. Always the same, always fantastic hospitality, and it's well received. We try and do the same thing here, but our problem happens to be the many miles or kilometers of distance for mobilization of drill rigs and so forth. It can take 3 or 4 days just to mobilize to one site. Other than that, I don't see too much differences. There might be a little bit of difference in geology, but I think, you know, you get some people that say our geology is different. Oh yeah, right. Tell us another one. You know, there's always difficult ground to drill, always, and there's always good ground to drill, and everybody loves to find the nice happy medium of what might be there, and the nice happy medium of what methods are the easiest ones to use as well.
That's a beautiful point you make, Colin. I've obviously gotten the opportunity to train and teach around the world as well. And I always get the, hey, gringo, you don't know how it is to drill down here in Chile, or hey, Yankee, get back up north, you know, and fundamentals are fundamentals. And that was a beautiful point you made about you need to have the theory and understand that, and then bring that together with that tribal instinct nature that makes a good driller. And my question would be, with your training, the age gap that we have in the States, I believe is the same as happening down there. So you have a lot of good operators that don't use apps, or, you know, now we have this merge of technology. And I want to follow up on that from what you said earlier. How is that being perceived? The gentlemen or the women that want to run apps versus the guys that go, I'm gonna, you know, I know my instinct. I can look at my gauges and I can run this hole.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. We've had the same problem here. But Brock, the difference happens to be is evolution. In the mineral game, it's got more to do with the geologists and mine managers who are always trying to get the next fantastic thing that's happening and have everybody use it. In water wells and environmental and in geotechnical, you've also got the hydrogeologists, the geotechnical engineers, or the environmental engineers who are doing the same thing. They are assisting the drillers to become more involved from the theory point of view. Because I think, and it's very good that this has happened, that in a lot of occasions now, you don't get the old driller that doesn't teach his offside or anything. And so you do what you're told, you know, they're gone. And I had them when I was learning the game. You just do as you're told, shut up, and you might learn something. Well, that's all gone. That's away. That doesn't happen anymore. We just cannot afford to be that way. And our communication between geologists, engineers, drillers, supervisors, managers, and so forth have gotten much better, much better. And that's only happened probably, I would say, in the last 5 to 10 years.
So that brings up my next question. Uh, Due to the remote nature of a lot of drilling projects, um, the execution is obviously different. In the States, a geologist, hydrogeologist, engineer can show up on a drilling site without notice, and here you better be very comfortable with being on a drilling site. Am I correct? If you're going to show up and collaborate with a drilling crew, how is that dynamic different? Because now you're, like you just said, you drive 3 days to a site.
That's not always the case, but what I wanted to point out was that sometimes it takes that long to get to a site, sometimes even longer. But we also, if you're at a mine site such as that, where it takes that long to get there, they'll have what we call fly in, fly out employees who are there for 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. Whereas the other side of the coin happens to be that you might only be 50 Ks or 30 miles away from a particular site or less, and the geologist will turn up at any time like they do in the States. The geologist, however, on the mine site will be there 24/7, and they will be on the site all the time. And the respect between the driller and the geologist has to be very, very good, because basically one needs to be advising the other as to what's going on all the time. And I think that's the most important thing, particularly from training point of view, is the communication, the understanding of that communication on both sides is the most important thing of all, because one will help the other. The problem we had previously, years ago, was the driller would not want to talk to the geologist. The driller thought the geologist or the hydrogeological engineer thinks he knows too much. Well, now that's changed. And the communication is much, much better. And I think training has brought that to a head. It really has, because drillers have all of a sudden realized that I can learn a lot more, even though I've tried all my life to keep all the practical stuff in my mind and not tell anybody. Now I'm starting to learn. And it's the drillers that are middle-aged that are ones that are changing. And the young ones have to change, and they don't mind. And the old ones, that's a sorry state, but the older ones, we're losing that expertise. People, I suppose, my age, when they go out of the industry, you don't get that expertise and that experience and that knowledge anymore. We've got to actually bring it forward and train all our younger people to have them understand as to what works best and why it works best.
I love the fact that you said the way drillers and geologists used to interact. We just think that's the way it is in America. And so if I think about that, due to the remote nature, or just your guys' safety standard is world class versus what we do in the States and what happens in many other countries. Why has Australia taken the stance of just being the best at drilling safety in the world?
Mostly comes out of the mining industry, Brock. The problem happens to be, it is a problem to a certain extent, because I think in some areas we've gone overboard. And I say overboard, when you look at a mine site, for example, is that everybody has to be safe and make sure they go home in the same condition they arrived at the site in the morning. We have things that are mandatory called job safety analysis, safe work method statements, toolbox meetings every morning or when it's needed. What we call MSDS sheets, which are the safety sheets for the products that we use. And a safety manual that every drilling contractor has to have, which would be at least 2 or 3 inches thick, or 2 or 3 of those. And each time they go to a mine site, it's probably 3 days going over their equipment, their personnel, the documents that they have, to make sure that they are qualified to be able to do the work on the site. But in sometimes it goes over the board to the extent that they treat everybody with the lowest common denominator and think we're all water cart drivers rather than drillers. And I'm a great believer in the fact that when you're involved in blast hole drilling, you're doing exactly the same thing day after day after day, and somebody else is making the decision for you. Whereas the 4, I suppose, methods, or not so much methods, but areas, sectors in the industry, such as water well, mineral exploration, geotechnical, and environmental, that driller has to make the decisions himself. And the beauty about it is that he's working away from the site and has to have the sixth sense to understand what's happening down there. That's something you're either going to, you'll get it or you won't. And I can usually teach somebody how to pull the levers in a drill rig within half an hour. It will take me at least three to 5 years to teach them how to be a driller. Unless, of course, they're a blast hole driller. It just does exactly the same thing time after time. They're not even allowed to change the bit or grease the rig. So, it's just one of those things that once you get it in your blood, it's very, very hard to get out. And we find it relatively easy to train people if they are interested. And usually everyone we get, they're pretty well full on interested, which is to make it easy for us. And I noticed when I was working in the States as well, everybody was keen and interested. It's just these two countries together have this thing where we're all keen to learn. And I think that's very, very important, as opposed to working, say, which I did a fair bit of in the Middle East. You'd have 20 or 30 offsiders on one drill rig, and they all have to do the same thing. There's a difference.
Yeah. So before Brock gets to his next question, you made me think of something. Like, it's been a bit of a challenge for companies to find talent here in the States, and I think all over North America, folks that want to go into the trades. How do you, in Australia, like how do you look for people to get into that pipeline? How do you find the people that you talk about being a good fit?
Jeremy, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're having exactly the same problem. When the mining industry died here in Australia was in 2012. And as though everybody sent an email to each other saying, we're all ready to stop work because things are not going too good. Well, drilling contractors lost a lot of work, a lot of contracts shut down overnight, had 6 or 12 months contracts shut down overnight. A lot of people went out of the industry and went into other different vocations, such as truck drivers, for example, where they're home every night, which is a little bit different in the drilling industry. Now, the problem we have is taking on somebody as a newbie recruit. We would always be looking for somebody with a mechanical background, somebody with a truck license, and a manual gearbox truck license, not just the automatic, although automatics are coming in and changing and so forth. We have two different licenses here, one's automatic and one's manual, or crash box, if you like it, like a road ranger. But as I say, mechanical background, truck license, and be interested and keen and want to learn. Those are the parameters of taking somebody into this industry. But we are having a tremendous problem of finding anyone who wants to go into this industry anymore. There's a lot of people out there. I think the scope now is probably 20% of what it used to be of people who want to work outdoors. People get very frightened these days of things like skin cancer for working outdoors. Well, it gets pretty hot here, the same as it does in Arizona and Texas and places like that. It gets pretty hot too, but it's those things that kids of today would prefer to go to university rather than go do a trade. And our trade vocations are sadly needed, I think, in both countries. A lot of parents, where I know that this started off in the States, it happens here as well, wanted their kids to go to university so that those kids would be better than what they would be themselves in their history. Well, in some respects, that's been bad, because tradesmen today here in Australia, plumbers, electricians, mechanics, fitters, actually get paid more than those going to come out of university. And a lot of people come out of university today can't get a job because there's just too many of them. So to be able to get into the industry is pretty easy today. It's just that people are not that interested in going into it, which is a shame.
It's a tough industry. There's a lot of unknown timelines. There's more risk and danger on a drilling site than there is on many other things we can work on. In North America, we have an age gap and we have so many opportunities and not enough people. We have this infrastructure bill coming, and drilling is tough and hot and dangerous, and the tribal mentality has made it hard. And then I think about Australia, and for us Americans, we see the things that say there's more dangerous, there's more venomous, things. You guys have this extreme weather, from storms to fires, to the time when I worked for Bayreuth and they said, Brock, you're going to get to go to Australia. And I was like, really? When? And they're like, you're going to Perth. And I went, what? Wait, time out. I want to go to Sydney and Brisbane first, and then you can send me to what might as well be Mars. But tell us about some extreme job sites that you had, some just from weather to wildlife, because that's what us Americans, we think about.
Yeah, I hear that, and it is quite different. And you guys get this opinion, and I think it's purported by us, that we've got every venomous snake in the world. We've got every animal that you walk outside your front door is going to kill you. And to some extent, that's right. But all you have to do is be careful. I know on some job sites, we would quite often see venomous snakes, and you've got kangaroos hopping around all over the place in a lot of places, and emus. And an emu is a bit like an ostrich. And I can remember when I was out west years and years ago, fixing a cable to a drill rig, and it was miles from anywhere. And I'm up at about 5 o'clock in the morning having a wash, and I've got 2 emus looking over my shoulder, wanting to know what I'm doing, because they're such an inquisitive sort of a bird. But frightened me, you wouldn't believe. He's out in the middle of nowhere, and here's these 2 emus sticking their head over your shoulder, wanting to know what's going on. The remoteness of Australia is something that you guys find difficult to understand. And it's only because of the fact that we've got a lot of desert. We've only got 25 million people. But we feel like it's too many. That's our attitude towards it. But I don't know, it's one of those things that you do just get used to. And I think the one difficulty, and when you were talking about going to Perth, Western Australia is a very, very big state. And that's where most of the remoteness comes from. Western Australia, South Australia, and Northern Territory. Queensland, unless you go Western Queensland, is not too bad. New South Wales, not too bad. Victoria, not too bad. Tasmania as well. They're all mostly residential areas. Although the farm that I come off as a boy was 5,000 acres. And I enjoyed working on that. And that's one of the other things I didn't mention to you. We like to get people who are farmers' sons to come into the industry. And those farmers always want those sons to go on to a trade, which is important for us in this industry, and it's important for their future. And I use my trade every day of the week, every day. At some time of the day, something will come up and I'm using that trade, and you're doing it automatically. It's one of those things you just do automatically without noticing. But yeah, Australia's a lovely place to live. It really is. And I'm not going to promote that to you, because I like living in America as well. And my wife is actually American, so she comes from Texas originally. And of course, we have iced tea every dinner time. Every meal we have at night time, it's always iced tea with it. So, and I pick up a little bit of and continue it on a little bit of the accent as well.
Okay. All right. So to, circle back a little bit to, young people coming into this industry or newbies, what are some traits that you see folks coming into the industry might be lacking, and what can they do to bring themselves up to speed to, better compete, whether it's in Australia or, the US or globally for drilling jobs?
Are you talking about contractor or employee?
Well, I think I was asking from an employee perspective, but I mean, contractors probably a different conversation. But let's talk about an employee perspective. Say, I'm, say I'm not that farm boy, but I'm intrigued by the industry. I'm pretty good in shop class. Like, what do I need to do to come into this industry and be welcomed?
Most important thing is to be keen, want to work, want to learn, and show the interest that you want to get ahead. Now, irrespective of where you've been, if you can show that mentality and that willing to learn, lots of drilling contractors will give you a start. I think that's more important than anything else. Commitment and willingness to learn. Because in this day and age, because of the fact that we've lost so many drillers and lost so many offsiders and people out of this industry, really it got to the point at one stage where Woolworths checkout operators were being offered a job on a drill rig. And that's not a problem, providing they're committed, providing they want to learn, and providing they think, right, this is a different thing, rather than, I think the amount of training that we put into people in this industry, you want to make sure that you're getting an average percentage of the right people in to start with, because you can spend a lot of time and money training somebody and it doesn't work out. And that's sad for everybody. Not only the employee, but the employer, the costs associated and everything. So I would think most important, Jeremy, it happens to be commitment and the willingness to learn. That's probably the same with every job, but it's probably more so in this drilling industry, I believe.
Right. Well, with that, I think that's all the questions we have for you today, Colin. So with that, we'll wrap up the episode. So thanks again. I'm intrigued to hear your perspective and to hear that our two countries are having a lot of the same issues. It sounds like there's a generational gap. There's not a lot of young folks coming into trades anymore. So it's interesting to hear a different perspective on that, but still facing the same challenges. So what did you think, Brock?
It was great to hear that we're in two different hemispheres and we're all working towards the same goals. We all love the idea of bringing resources out of the ground and discovering the unknown, but we got to figure out the right elevator pitch. And his advice about being keen and just embracing it is what I tell every young man and woman that comes up to me that goes, how do I further myself in this industry? And the last piece, I keep hearing this thing about Colin loving America, and we can just do an exchange program, and you can come live in my house and do the training up here, and I'll go down there and do some training for you, sir.
Sounds great to me, Brock. I'll be in that.
So
yeah.
So we'll work on the cultural exchange from here on out. So I'm sure Colin appreciates the offer. So hey, thanks again, Colin. We do appreciate you being on the show. And so where can the audience find out more about you?
Best my email address, which is colin.barden@intertech.com.au. But anybody in this country wants to know how to get a hold of me, they can seem to find access through the association as well, which is the Australian Drilling Industry Association. And one of the things that I probably should have mentioned, that we've got around about 900 members in the association. Employees and so forth would probably be around about 1,500 to 2,000 or more, depending on the sector of the industry. So there's not many in comparison to what's in the United States. And we all have a tendency to learn together through the association a lot too, which is excellent. So yeah, contact the association, you usually get a hold of me.
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to the kind of 1+1 = 3 of U.S., Australia, Canada, Europe, all connecting. When we all get together, kind of interesting things can happen when we bounce ideas off each other.
That is very true. And interesting things, I believe that you get a lot of things that happen in those situations that nobody had thought of. It's like employing left and right brain thinkers. You will always get a perspective in some respects that you had never thought of. And you think to yourself, well, that might work. And invariably it does. But you would never get it unless you had a different thought process coming to the table. And I think that's important, so that you get varied ideas as to how to address a problem. And that's very important. And then you take a selection of what you think might work, and hopefully it does. And as Brock will know, at least 5 times out of 10, it won't.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. So, of course, you can find fresh episodes of the show on our website or on Apple Podcasts every other week. And just search Drilling Insight and hit that subscribe button. And visit thedriller.com for the latest industry news and views. And don't forget to follow us on the usual social media channels. So until next time, this is Drilling Insight. Thank you.